we're all wounded this weekend.
I know.
Devin, or from this weekend.
What's going on?
Shane is out of commission with sick. Stan is out of commission with children. I am out of commission from rocking on Friday and Saturday night, and I'm exhausted still. Playing bass in a cover band.
Oh,
Devin.
really? Did you?
Yes.
What was your favorite song that you played?
I get to sing one song, and that song is, we played 23 songs,
really?
By the way. I don't think the people at this party wanted to hear 23 songs from 45-year-old men, but we did that. They got it. I get to sing Flagpole Sitta by Harvey Danger, which is maybe a sort of like pop punk song from about 99 that maybe you would know.
I think
the song that people liked the best was Footloose.
Okay.
Honestly.
Yeah. Gets the people going.
We played some old people stuff.
Yeah.
Devin, I'm no joke. The song that we closed on was Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. So,
I mean, it's a classic.
It does work.
I was going to say, I didn't quite have the same experience this weekend. I played Narsecue this weekend.
Yes. You did all right?
Yeah, I lost in the finals.
You got the finals.
Lost in the finals. But, I mean, I got some credit to take home, so you can use that credit to buy some Modern Horizons 3 cards, maybe.
Some Nadu. Yeah, and you're also tired from stream. 8 hours of stream today. Yeah,
8 hours today. I did 12 hours on Friday, too, which was the early access streamer thing which, by the way, that's the first time they've had it on Magic Online. So, yeah, I did 12 hours on Friday and then 8 hours today, and I'm planning on doing 12 more tomorrow and the next day, so.
Oh, my gosh. All right. We better get into it then. Hello and welcome to episode 279 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Dave here in Chicago, and with me on the line is none other than Devin O'Donnell, aka Doomwake.
That's me. Notably, you are not Stan or Shane, who typically do the intros. Not Stan.
Exactly. Yeah, they love to do they always want to do the intro.
I know.
And I'm like, I've been here just as long, guys. I have to wait for double out to do the intro. Actually, I don't like doing. I like doing my interrupting bit.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. As we mentioned in the open, Shane is out, Stan is out. So it's just Devin and I this week, and we are going to keep it focused on business because there's a lot of business to talk about this week. Is that right?
Just the two of us. Yes, there is quite a lot of business of the bird variety, maybe the spaghetti alien variety, maybe a little bit of griefing too. Get a lot of everything.
I mean, a lot of different things going on. But you know who else means business?
Heavy Play.
Heavy Play does. Heavy Play, a new card gaming accessories brand that'll improve your gameplay and your game day. If you haven't tried them out yet, please go take a look at their website, check them out. They have been a long time been a supporter of both Devin's stream and the Dive Down podcast. Their playmats, deck boxes, and card sleeves feature enhanced ergonomics, mobility, and protection. We love them. Heavy Play's unique Equip Mag system allows you to magnetically attach dice, bundle decks, carry your playmats, bring all your brand new shiny cards to the LGS or bring them home from the LGS, depending on how you want to do it. Carry it all in a single hand. And you can check out heavyplay.com and use code the Dive Down 2024, all one word, for 10% off your first order. That is Heavy Play, and we thank you so much. I imagine a lot of people are going to be thinking about getting back to the shops.
Oh yeah,
right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to get some MH3 cards, if you're going to buy some Nadus and maybe some Springheart Nantukos and some other stuff, you want to make sure that stuff is protected.
That's right. And on this week's show, we're going to talk about the lucky people who have gotten to play with Modern Horizons 3 cards so much, Devin being one of those people, as he was mentioning earlier. That is a lot of Shukos.
Only 7.
Did you find those in bulk boxes?
No,
or did you...
I bought them. The day that somebody, I had previewed it and somebody posted in chat of Shuko, and I was like, oh boy. And that's when I bought a couple of them, because there's some people at my LGS that need some too, so...
Is it an uncommon? It's an uncommon, right?
It is. Funny enough, it is an uncommon. It was in the same precon or starter deck, whatever you want to call it, way back in Betrayers of Kamigawa. It was in the same precon as Umezawa's Jite. And one of their Shuko happens to be more expensive than Umezawa's Jite now. And if you told people that were playing standard, 20 years ago or whatever, that was the case, they would have laughed at you.
Jite is only like $10. Isn't Shuko only up to 15?
Yeah, it's still more expensive, right?
I sold a Jite in like 2014 for like $60.
Really?
Because I guess maybe people were still playing it in Legacy or something at that point occasionally. I don't know. But I guess times they do change.
Yeah, I think it's been reprinted a couple times too.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about early impressions of cards, thanks to Devon's chance to preview the stream, Devon's chance to play a lot today. He's got about 20 hours of streaming in Modern Horizons games so far. And then also SCG Con this weekend actually had a 5K on Sunday where people were playing with Modern Horizons cards.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're not going to break down the entire event, but what I thought we would do is basically this whole episode is just Cool Decks Inc. It's going to be me and Devon going, hey, do you see that deck?
This deck's cool.
It's pretty sweet. Sweet, right? Like that's kind of what this is. And we have a certain number of things that we want to talk about, but that's what it is. And of course, we'll be referring to other content creators who we've been watching: Mason Clark, Aspiring Spike, Young Dingo, other people who have been out there making stuff that we have noticed. But really, it's just first impressions. Devon, I have opened 6 packs of Modern Horizons so far. I went to my LGS here in Oak Park, Illinois. Shout out Grandmaster Games. I went there Sunday evening thinking that maybe I could buy a pre-release kit or something like that because I wasn't able to get out to one of the tournaments. Mm-hmm. No, sold out. They were sold out of everything except for 5 set booster packs and 4 collector booster packs that were sitting there on the counter. I did not buy all of those collector booster packs. I did buy 1 collector booster pack. I didn't open anything great, but I did open a bunch of cards that are good and that will be played. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that they were already sold out. The LGS that I went to, I don't know what their sale product was, but they had they opened a bunch of boxes and put stuff in binders, and a lot of the cards that you would expect were gone, but they still had some stuff left over.
Oh yeah, that's good. All right, but before we get into it, a little bit of housekeeping. New patrons, thank you, Parker K, for joining the Dive Down Nation. We appreciate you. No new increased tiers, that is A-OK. But we did get a number of new reviews across at Spotify, where we are always seeing a lot of people. We had 8 people comment on the last episode, which is kind of a lot for us. So Gabriel A, Anthony D, Dan J, Alex N, Nicholas T, Ethan, Seth, and RMSED, thank you so much for engaging in the comments on Spotify. Alex N called me the GOAT in their comment for some reason, or just a goat, or maybe just goated or something. I don't know what the kids say these days. But if you would like to support the Dive Down, you could go to Patreon, patreon.com/the Dive Down. Go to our store, which is thedivedown.com/store. You can go to Mana Traders and use the Dive Down _43A. That will be in the show notes. That is our code through the end of June to get 10% off of renting these new Magic the Gathering cards from Modern Horizons 3. And then, of course, if you would like to go help out our friends at Energy, you could go to Nerd Rage Gaming and use code DIVE8 to basically get a tax-free purchase, or 8% off of your purchase is what it is. And that's all the ways that you support us. And Devon, that's it.
That's it. Ready to talk about some MH3?
Absolutely. We don't have to do funny bits like Shane always insists at the beginning of shows. Shane really is the one who wants the funny.
We could try. See, the thing is, I'm not that funny.
I think I'm medium funny, but I'm also kind of like, we're all tired and there's information to be conveyed to the masses.
Yeah.
So, let's do it.
Just jamming.
I personally think that there's only one place that we can start this weekend.
Oh.
And I think you agree with me.
Oh, yeah.
That we really just have to start with a certain bird wizard.
Yeah.
More bird wizards causing problems not causing problems, but being good cards.
You know what? It's really funny where So for those of the listeners that don't know, this was the preview card that I was sent by WotC, and they sent it to me like a week and a half in advance. And the first time I read the card, I was like, this looks like nonsense. I didn't quite understand it at first. And then it's one of those things where you read it a second time and it's like, okay, I kind of, you could like target it with mutagenic growth and gut shot. And the other thing that's not quite necessarily apparent on first read is the twice per turn, and I think this is what catches a lot of people up. You would think that if a card says twice per turn on it, you only get the trigger twice per turn, when the reality is that's just not how it works. It's twice per turn might as well not exist on the card.
Yeah, especially if you build the right shell around it, and that's what we're really here to talk about, because it seemed like going into the release, many people kind of come around to the opinion that Nadu was going to be a thing. Right? Like, It was just a question of like, what's the right shell to build it with? And there's been a lot floating around. The big thing, of course, if you have been living under a rock, is we are mostly looking for ways to target Nadu and generate lots of tokens via various methods, right? Generate lots of things to gain the Nadu trigger as well.
Yep.
And there's a couple of ways to do that. I'll talk about the targeting first, because one of them is something I didn't know about. So the first one is Shuko, of course, is a card that people are talking about, which we talked about last week. It's a 1-mana artifact equipment. It has equip 0. It gives +1/+0. A long time, like nobody wanted this card for anything, and all of a sudden it's super useful in something like this because it is Sagaable and it is Stoneforge Mysticable. So most of these builds have been started in that kind of zone. Now, the other card that I didn't realize that people might try is this 3-drop from Time Spiral.
Oh, yeah.
Outrider and Vec.
Outrider and Core, I think. One of those
is it in
two.
Core?
I think it's in Core.
Outrider and Core. Yeah. So Outrider and Core. And that card basically has a 0-mana target ability that does nothing that you care about, right? You don't care about it, do you?
I think it either redirects or prevents the next one damage. But yeah, the only thing that matters is you can pay 0 to target your creature with it and add nauseam.
Yep. It is a 2/2 for 3 with flanking.
Can't forget about flanking.
It's got flanking. I love it. And it has a 0-mana activated ability that says the next 1 damage that would be dealt to Outrider and Core this turn is dealt to target creature you control instead. So you are targeting the creature and that with it, and you can do it for free, and that is what it is. Now, if someone does start dealing damage to Outrider and Core, you're going to have to remember the order that you did these things.
True. The one really cool thing about Outrider versus Shuko is, you can theoretically like have a Nadu in play, and you can put Stoneforge a Shuko into play on your opponent's turn, but you can't equip at instant speed. So the important part about Outrider is, if you're kind of in this sort of like small ball game where you're lower on resources, Outrider can target your stuff on your turn and on your opponent's turn. So if you're lower, like you have less stuff going on, you can activate it on your turn and then draw more cards on their turn to help start the engine and get the juices flowing.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then you can also do things for 0 mana, like this particular build. So we're looking at Devon's first build from the streamer event, or at least that's where I'm starting. Mm-hmm. There are other ways to target in here. Sylvan Safekeeper, if you want to spend lands to target things because you're desperate, you can do it. But the other huge, so this is the targeting kind of suite that we've talked about here. But what do you think is the next kind of essential part of the package?
So I would say, weirdly, so the combo, I guess the combo part of this is eventually what you're doing is you're trying to trigger Nadu, an indeterminable amount of times to essentially either put your whole land, all of your lands on your deck into play, or draw your entire deck. Eventually, because for some reason the Nadu puts the lands into play untapped. Not quite sure why it does that. Probably could have easily put it into play tapped. But you essentially just put your blue sources into play, draw the Oracle, cast the Oracle. Now, theoretically, you don't actually have to play the Thassa's Oracle, and I think that if you're playing it in paper, it's actually probably correct to not play it. The only reason I played Oracle is for time constraints, because what I'm about to describe cannot be done on Magic Online. So the other combo that you can actually do is, if you play one Cephalid Colosseum, you can eventually hit the Cephalid Colosseum because you draw your entire deck. You Colosseum them to make them draw 3, discard 3. Then you Safekeeper, sacrifice all of your lands, Endurance, shuffle all of your lands back in, do the combo again, and then put all those lands into play with the Colosseum. And the reason that it's infinite is because you can stack the Endurance triggers so that you sacrifice it before you shuffle it back in. So you just basically loop the Endurance in the Colosseum just infinite times. Now, obviously, that's not possible on Magic Online because that would take 3 hours. But in paper, you can just say like, here, I have demonstrated a loop.
Oh my gosh! And this deck is still good, even on Magic. It seems to be even good on Magic Online, where you're playing I guess what you think is a slightly suboptimal kill, basically with Oracle.
Yeah, the only reason I would say the Oracle is suboptimal is the Colosseum can just be a win condition in your mana base, but the Oracle is a card that you actually have to draw, and it doesn't really do that much. One other important thing is the blue source count is kind of low for casting Thassa's Oracle, but that's where the Safekeeper is very important, because if you, say, draw too many blue sources, what you can actually do is similar to that loop that I was discussing, where you flip your whole deck over, you sacrifice your blue-producing lands, Endurance them back in, and then do the Nadu combo again. This time, the blue sources come into play untapped. That way you can cast the Oracle. So yeah, I would say the Safekeeper, it's only a one of, and I've been thinking about playing more, but that card is very, very integral to, kind of have that like sort of extra layer of insurance in case things go wrong.
Wow. Okay.
It's a wild deck.
And the other yes, this is really wild. And another huge part of this deck is Springheart and Nantuko, right?
Yes.
Is that essential to the combo? Like, because you have to generate all these tokens to be able to keep getting additional triggers, or do you sometimes not even need this card?
So when you're going off and like actually killing your opponent in a turn, you do need Nantuko, at least for this version, where if you have a Nantuko in play, you make a land drop, make a 1/1 token. That new 1/1 token that you make has 2 separate instances of the Nadu ability, because Nadu applies to each creature you control, even ones that are coming into play after you play the Nadu. So each token you can then Shuko twice to hit more lands, and so on and so forth. What's also cool about Nadu is you can, in that same loop that I was talking about, you can hardcast Endurance, and then Springheart has a bestow ability. So if you bestow it onto a creature, landfall, instead of making a 1/1, you can pay 2 to make a copy of the creature, and you can just kind of make copies of the Endurance to kind of keep that loop going as well. So there's some weird stuff that you can do with bestowing. But yeah, you do need tokens. I mean, in theory, you could just, draw all of your creatures, I guess, but eventually you would want to get that into play to help generate more stuff and more Nadu triggers.
Yeah, and again, to underline, you don't run out of mana in this combo because the lands come into play untapped off of Nadu. So that means that when you draw into your creatures and your lands go into play, you can cast lots of them. Mm-hmm. And you can do things like Convoke with a Quarter Calling, or in this first build that we had, you had Primal Prayers and Guide of Souls in it, which it sounded like you didn't stick with, but...
No, I mean, I thought that when I first saw Primal Prayers, I thought that it was kind of perfect for this sort of deck where it's combo that involves creatures that also, has some 3-mana cards. But the problem with Primal Prayers is you kind of need to be a little bit more of a dedicated energy deck for it to be good, which is why I thought the Guide of Souls would be good. But it turns out that it doesn't necessarily help you find your combo pieces. It's not like a Chord or a Coco or anything. It really just is sort of this mana engine that is good with Guide of Souls, but you need to be kind of doing more, you need to build more around the Primal Prayers and the Guide of Souls stuff.
Yeah. So the deck that you ended up on is much more like, it's 4 Quarter Calling, 4 Mystics, 4 Giver of Runes. So these weren't in your first build. This is like extra protection for Nadu and things like that. 4 Delighted Halfling, 4 Nadu, 4 Springheart and Nantuko, 3 Wall of Roots, 1 Thassa's Oracle, 3 Teferi Time Ravelers, a Sylvan Safekeeper, 1 of the Outrider and Cores, a Scoot Swarm, a Cauldron Complete, an Endurance, 2 Shukos, and then we're into lands there, which I won't get into, but they include things like a Boseiju, a Dryad Arbor, a few Urza Sagas, and then kind of a mana base. And is this still kind of like where you're at with this deck right now, or what do you think?
This is the list that I played on stream. I like this version a lot. The one thing that I kind of want to experiment more is just playing less Giver of Runes and more Sylvan Safekeepers. And the reason for that is they kind of offer you similar things in terms of protecting your combo pieces. But what's nice about Safekeeper is you can target something twice in the same turn with it, whereas Giver is only one activation per turn. So
Right.
you can just kind of like get into the spot where you have a Safekeeper and a Nadu, and you just sack a land, target your Nadu. And what's also nice about this is Safekeeper gives Shroud, which means that you can't target it again. But if you Safekeeper target Nadu, you can then respond to the original Safekeeper activation and just sack another land to get the second trigger, even and kind of getting around Shroud. And it's also important that Nadu puts extra lands into play, which gives you more activations of the Safekeeper. So.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing is, Safekeeper doesn't have summoning sickness.
Yep.
So if you draw into one in the middle of your combo, it's just an activated ability. It doesn't require a tap. So you can just do it, and that's online right away.
Yeah, Safekeeper was very impressive when I played it, and I think I would probably consider going up to 3, maybe 4 copies.
Wow, 3 or 4 copies. Amazing. So we talked about that Vegas 5K at SCG Con. The top 8 of that event had 2 Nadu decks already. 2 Bant Nadu decks. They were in 7th and 8th place. I was going to say, I actually don't remember who won that event, but I do. It was Mill that won that event.
Yeah, it was Blitz, actually.
Got it. Okay. What do you think? Have you looked at these lists? Because they are a little bit different. I mean, one thing that these lists are running, like the first one I thought was pretty interesting, felt like very combo focused and almost like no, I don't want to say mid-range, but it felt like it was up on Sylvan Safekeepers from where you were. It had 7 Memnite / Ornithopters in it.
Mm-hmm.
What's up with that?
So,
is that just targets for no mana, or not targets for no mana, but additional creatures for no mana, or what do you think?
What's funny about this list is...
and it doesn't have Springheart and Nantuko.
I was just going to mention that. There are no Springheart and Nantukos. Yeah. And so I'm not exactly sure why you would come to the conclusion that you don't want to play Springheart and Nantuko. But the theory, I kind of understand it, where, so if you're drawing your whole deck with Nadu, I guess it's less if you don't have the Nantuko. But when you draw into a Memnite, that's 2 more activations. Draw into an Ornithopter, that's 2 more activations, so on and so forth. I do feel like you probably lose some amount of, I don't know if I want to call it consistency, but some amount of like being able to guarantee that you kill them the turn that you play the Nadu without because the Nantuko basically means it's guaranteed. But I don't know, this is definitely an interesting approach. There's Grazers, which is we're choosing to play Grazer instead of the Delighted Halfling, which that's an interesting take. I guess it's better there's 4 Colony Gardens in the mana base too, which does give you a token for Nadu. This is kind of a weird one.
Yeah, it just felt to me like this was a little more kind of like we're going to play worse cards that are enablers for just the combo. Mm-hmm. So our cards don't do anything else, but this is it.
4 Summoners Pact as well. This one's not messing around.
Right. And then the other one was super interesting too. So that was Connor Opedike. Mm-hmm. And then the other one that was in here was by someone named Sean Vaihe. And it was kind of way more mid-rangey to me. This one had Coiling Oracle in it. It had Icefang Coatl, and it had 4 Flare of Denial. So it felt like we were actually just packing in, protection in the form of Flare, but also some cards that are just straight up value cards if you're not going on the combo right away. Now, Coiling Oracle and Icefang Coatl both turn on Flare of Denial, which I thought was interesting as well. And you don't have, the other 2 lists that we've been looking at do not have that ability. What do you think about this one?
I think this is a lot closer to what Spike was playing on, like when he was playing with Dingo, because I know that I know that Spike didn't have the fastest Oracle win condition, but I know he had 4 Coiling Oracle, 4 Icefang, 4 Flare of Denial. I think it's an interesting approach. My only Flare of Denial is an extremely powerful card. My only issue is 8 is kind of low to be able to enable it. If you're talking about, the pitch elementals like Grief and Subtlety and stuff, usually you kind of want to be in the 16 to 18 range. So I'm a little bit scared of only playing 8 blue creatures. But, past Oracle and Icefang, are there any other good blue creatures that support the combo?
I mean, you're playing Nadu.
You don't want to sack that, though.
You don't, but I guess if
It
you
counts,
had to
yeah.
for some reason, and you had another one in your hand, you could sack
Sure.
that one and then play another one out.
Yeah.
So you have 12-ish targets, but 4 of them you probably do not want to use. What's your feeling on this deck coming out of today? Like, did you see it a lot on stream today, or kind of like where are we at? Like, because this was the one that has been the biggest blip on the radar, I think, so far.
Yeah. I didn't play. I played one league with it today. I didn't play against it at all. I mean, I'm at a point where it's. I think that the version, like at least the last version that I played today, the one with more safekeepers and less give reverence, I think that's probably just about where I would want to be right now. And I'm not exactly sure where to take this particular version of the deck, but I think that there's also a lot of areas unexplored where you can kind of slot the Nadu package into other decks. Maybe decks that already wanted to play Stoneforge Mystic or Urza Saga anyways, because you just put a Shuko in the deck and it's kind of free. And I think I saw like Caleb talking about Hammer Time with it or Yawgmoth with it.
What?
I was even thinking about just playing it in a 4-color deck. Like you just put it in Omnath. Like you just Omnath, Ring, Red and 6 to Fairy, and then here's my Nadu combo. I think that there's a lot of untapped potential with this, and very excited to see where it goes.
For what it's worth, out of all those decks you just listed, I thought your idea to put it in Omnath was the thing that made the most sense to me. Because sometimes Omnath does want to have a combo.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I think just it's a different way to go with that deck where you play it, play your mid-rangey kind of game and then have a combo close. And it's not like Nadu's terrible if you're not comboing off. It's not great, but at least it's a value engine that draws cards if you're kind of going, and then eventually you can find a way to kill somebody with it. So I thought that was an interesting way to go. But this, I think that coming out of this first pass, everybody's kind of agreeing this is definitely like a real core in Modern that people are going to have to be aware of how to counter game against, right? Now, it might end up in some different deck, but...
Yeah, Nadu itself is the real deal. Not exactly sure. These are just kind of the week 1 list. Maybe they're a little untuned and they need a little bit more work. But Nadu itself has felt very, very powerful. And like the best part about it is you can't really ever trade 1-for-1 with it. If they go to kill it, you're always going to be up a card. So it's a messed up card.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go on and from here to maybe another group of messed up cards, maybe-ish, and those are Eldrazi, which I just kind of think are messed up in general. Introduced a secret 6th color to Magic.
You're not a big fan of the Eldrazi, are you?
I don't like Eldrazi, no.
I could tell.
Yeah. All right, so let's start with Eldrazi Tron. So Eldrazi Tron is a deck that everybody is really familiar with, that we kind of knew that many of the Eldrazi enablers would end up in, most notably Ugin's Labyrinth. At that Las Vegas event, someone named Damian Del Nero came in 3rd place with I don't know, what do you think of this deck? Is this deck Tron? Is it Eldrazi Tron? Like I guess it's Eldrazi Tron.
It's Eldrazi Tron, I would say. It's weird though.
So here's what made the list. It's 4 Karn the Great Creator, 4 Sowing Mycospawn, which is that new card that has kicker, and it gets you a land and destroys one of their lands if you kick it. Then you have 4 Thought-Knot Seer, 4 Devourer of Destiny, 3 Worldbreaker, which is a card that I forgot existed, but is a very good card. Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger in a 2-pack, 4 Chromatic Spear, 4 Expedition Map, 3 One Ring, 3 All Is Dust, 3 Kozilek's Commands, and then all the mana you would expect plus 2 Forest. So it's for each of these: Eldrazi Temple, Ugin's Labyrinth, Urza's Power Plant, Urza's Mine, Urza's Tower. I won't read the sideboard. I think that this is pretty much what we thought Tron was gonna be, right?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because when I was building Eldrazi decks, I kind of I have an E-Tron deck, but I didn't have any of the green cards in it, so I didn't have the Sowing Mycospawns or I guess that's really, I thought there was Ancient Stirrings, but I guess not. No, it's just the Mycospawns.
Worldbreaker.
Oh yeah, Worldbreaker, sure.
Yeah.
So I kind of was of the opinion that you wanted to build the Eldrazi decks a little bit more aggressively. So like the Eldrazi Mimics and a little bit more lower to the ground. But this one is like sort of in the middle, but also going over the top at the same time, where you're keeping the 1 mana cards like Sphere and Map to help facilitate getting to Tron faster. You're still playing the 2 mana lands with Thought-Knots here, so it's kind of sort of like doing the best of both worlds. And this seems like an interesting approach. I question the need for Chromatic Sphere, though, because we don't have any Ancient Stirrings or Sylvan Scryings, so it seems like these spheres might be, like, maybe not necessary. Maybe if you're going to also play Stirrings, I could see playing it, but without the Stirrings, I'm not sure what we're doing with these here.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, definitely. I mean, you already have 8 ways to search up your forest if you need it. You could also always throw something in the sideboard and be able to get it with Karn if you wanted to, which I don't think there's anything in here right now that does that. But, if you were like, hey, I want some safety here, I want to be able to search up a green source through lots of different ways, you could do that in order to move that. You could even put a single Chromatic Sphere in your sideboard if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that makes sense. Maybe it's just kind of like an old habits die hard kind of thing, and they just love being able to charm through certain turns by drawing a card. But at any rate, the one thing that stuck out to me the most about this list is just absolutely forgetting that Worldbreaker existed and was a colorless card and was a hit for Ugin's Labyrinth. And it feels like a very, very good hit for decks that want to play Ugin's Labyrinth that are on the big side of things.
Right, exactly. If you have access to green mana and you're a Labyrinth deck, that was kind of the issue for me, is the Eldrazi decks that I were building were either colorless or blue-red. And it's weird because Myco Spawn and Thief of Existence, which is a card that is not present in this deck list, but is a card that I kind of had rated pretty highly. Those two are both green Eldrazi's that are very, very powerful. And it's really difficult to I think the issue that when I was trying to build these decks was, if you want to play Tron, and you want to play the 2 mana lands, and you want to play Ancient Stirrings, it's essentially impossible to do that because you have to play, your 20 lands are already accounted for. You have the Tron lands and the 8 Soul lands. So it's, how do you get enough untapped green sources on turn 1 to be able to cast Ancient Stirrings, which you just can't do that.
Right.
But maybe you have to think about it as like Ancient Stirrings as a turn 2 play, or maybe even a turn 3 play after you've done some other stuff. You could also consider playing Talismans too.
Yeah, I have seen some early deck lists that had Talismans as part of this, for sure, because of the whole ramp plus fix aspect of it that Team Handshake or whatever tried last year at the tour, which was pretty cool. Thief of Existence, I did want to mention, a couple of people pointed out to me that we sort of glossed over the way that Thief of Existence actually works, because it does not get rid of creatures.
Yeah, I thought it did at first.
Yeah, I think we all kind of talked like it did on the show last week, and so it's kind of like, all right, yeah, we missed that one. I still think it's a pretty good card, but yeah, I don't think it's it doesn't have as broad of an application as kind of we were expecting at first, I think. Not quite.
Yeah, it's killing like an amulet maybe here and there. But there's not a ton of stuff.
Yep. So I think this deck is cool. I think this is the type of thing that Shane might try out when he's thinking about where he would go with Tron. Essentially, I would not be surprised if this hangs around. It does, to me, when I look at it, feel like, well, why would we run green Tron when we could run this Tron? In the green Tron list that I've seen, the only difference has been like, oh, they're running Wormcoil Engine or something like that, and it's like, well, it's not really anything stopping you from running some life gaining here if you're worried about burn or something, or prowess. But anyway, this really felt to me like, okay, maybe we have this weird unification of all the big Trons into a single deck list that's going to happen for a minute.
Yeah, I think I still prefer the kind of the more aggressive version, which maybe we can talk about after this.
I will say personally, I very much am more, as far as Eldrazi goes and using Ugin's Labyrinth, I'm much more appealed by, but that's just kind of my style, is a couple of different Eldrazi aggro decks that happened over the weekend, including one that you were playing in the preview event. And that is a blue-red aggro Eldrazi list. Do you want to describe it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the list that's actually on Moxfield, so I'll read out the list that I played on the streamer event, so it's very close to this, but the curve's going to start with Eldrazi Mimic and It That Heralds the End, 4 copies of each. Then we kind of go up to 3, where we have 4 Eldrazi Landbreaker, 4 Null Drifter, honorary 3-drop, and then 4 Thought-Knots here, 4 Reality Smasher, and 4 Devourer of Destiny. Then 3 Dismember, 3 Kozilek's Command, 2 All Is Dust.
I love this curve.
I know. It's got some 2-drops, got some 3s.
Last week, I went and tried to buy Eldrazi Mimic. Sold out, Devin.
Really? Already?
Sold out. Eldrazi Mimic. A card that's been waiting for almost 10 years to be broken again. I don't know about broken here, but definitely I watched you play against Everett when he was playing Boros, kind of like a Boros mid-range deck that we could talk about maybe a little bit later down the line. This deck looked, or a deck close to this, your Eldrazi kind of aggro core looked very sweet.
Yeah, and honestly, the card that impressed me the most, which we did talk about a little bit in the spoiler episode, but Eldrazi Linebreaker, that card hits like an absolute truck. Like, it's just crazy to me how unbelievably aggressive that card is, where you have the curve, you're playing the 4 Temple for Ugin's Labyrinth, and just the curve of turn 1 Mimic, turn 2 Linebreaker, make my Mimic a 3/3, pump the Linebreaker, attack for 8. That's it, 8 on turn 2. And then if you follow that up with anything else, like the Linebreaker gets exponentially better because it's pumping for each Eldrazi you control. Something I also realized, Eldrazi Sky Spawner, which is in the new version of the deck, makes 2 bodies. And that's 2 more power with Linebreaker because it counts for each Eldrazi. So I thought that was kind of disgusting.
Eldrazi Sky Spawner, not a card I was expecting to see in Modern in this era, but it is a cool card. I mean, it's a 2/1 flyer.
They played it back in the day.
Oh, they sure did. Yeah, in Bant Eldrazi. I remember that deck. And so it's a 2 generic and a blue for a 2/1 flyer that also puts a Eldrazi Scion token into play, one of the ones that has power, a 1/1. So this is from the Battle for Zendikar era.
Yep. And the other really important thing about this deck that I want to touch on is, so a lot of people were kind of, gun shy of Eldrazi Mimic and just the natural, like, is your deck aggressive enough without the Eye of Ugin or whatever? And what's really cool about specifically the interaction between Eldrazi Mimic and Null Drifter, where you want to have a high density of 7 mana cards to make sure that you have enough for your Ugin's Labyrinth. But Null Drifter is cool because it's a fake 7 mana card where the bio clause is just, divination. But divination has a low floor. But when you're pairing divination with Eldrazi Mimic, you're getting 4 damage out of your divination, and that makes the floor on Null Drifter so much higher.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to be clear, the list that I'm looking at here on Moxfield, which I think is not quite the same one that you described, but I think for this point it's the same. There are 10 hits for Labyrinth in this deck. Yep. Is that right? It's 2
same
All
number.
Is Dust. Okay. 2 All Is Dust, 4 Devourer of Destiny, and 4 Null Drifter. And did that feel like enough as you were playing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there was a situation where I had Ugin's Labyrinth in my opening hand without a 7 mana card.
Awesome. I was just going to try to do some hypergeometric math really quickly, but you know what? I guarantee Frank Karsten will put a tweet out about this soon enough that says how many 7s you should have or what the distribution of odds will be for different 7s at different rates. But
yeah, I don't exactly know who said 10, but we just kind of stuck with it and ran with it because every list that I've seen is basically the same number. So we're kind of we're just hoping that the first person was right.
Everybody's around 10.
Yeah.
Frank will fix you if it's not. We'll see. We'll see.
We'll be getting a letter from Frank.
Yes. Yeah. I would love to get a letter from Frank. Frank sent me a letter for no reason, just to let me know that you listen still and you care. All right. So you said you like this core better as far as the kind of Ugin's Labyrinth, using Ugin's Labyrinth goes than Big Tron. Yeah.
So the reason is like, the best way to take advantage of having more mana early on is just use your mana, right? If you just look at the Tron deck list, if we go back and kind of circle back to just the Tron deck list, like what does this deck have for on turn 1 that they can use 2 mana on? I guess they can play a sphere and a map. It's like they're not really taking advantage of that burst of mana. Now, I guess you could argue that, like, okay, well, you can just, like, instead of using the burst of mana fast, you can just kind of play that into the longer game. But that also exposes you a lot harder to the stone rains, like Boseiju and, opposing, like, I guess maybe people start playing Field of Ruin again or stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it kind of runs into the issue of just being, like, if you tap or if they Boseiju your Ugin's Labyrinth that's tapped, you can't get your thing back, that's awkward. But just like the ability to pour as much pressure on as possible, you're kind of taking advantage of that burst of mana a lot better than the Tron decks, and also Linebreaker is just completely messed up. I feel like I would play 8 of that card if they let me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we said a minute ago, I don't like Eldrazi. I have two things to say. One is, a minute ago that I don't like Eldrazi. I don't like Ulamog and the big giant Eldrazi's, but I used to love playing Eldrazi and Taxes. Do you remember a streamer by the name of Peanips who played basically black-white Eldrazi online, and that was the only deck that they played, and they 5-0'd with it all the time? This is in the like
Wasteland Strangler,
early 2020. Yes, yeah. It was like that. I definitely had that deck in paper. Used to love to play it. I like Reality Smasher a lot. So I much prefer this list where we're playing that kind of stuff as well, but that's just my personality. I did want to say, I think you're right about Chromatic Sphere, by the way. I wonder a little bit if that's why Damien kept Chromatic Sphere in this deck, was so that they had a way to get value out of Ugin's Labyrinth.
Yeah, just double spell
on turn 1. Yeah, it's double spell. I mean, I guess you go Chromatic Sphere into Expedition map if you do that, but at least it's even then, like, even if you just fire off Chromatic Sphere, at least you're drawing a card again right away and cycling through your deck and using the mana, which is a little weird because then you're just spending a card to draw a card, so maybe it's not that great, but we'll see.
Yeah, the last two things I want to touch on. I mentioned that I had It That Heralds the End in the original deck list. That card was bad. Was very bad every time. Would not play.
Yeah, that's the one that it like buffs Eldrazi. Is that what that card is?
Yeah, it's like 2/2 for 1C, pumps all your Eldrazi's, and then your 7 mana spells cost 1 less. The cost reduction never comes up. 2 mana 2/2 is just not a good body. And then the last thing that I want to mention is Devourer of Destiny. That card was really, really good. What's also very important about it is they stack. So if you have 2 in your opening hand, you just reveal both of them, and you're essentially just Vampiric Tutoring on your first turn.
Now, I'll be curious to see where this goes, because I know people have tried red-green Eldrazi too. I saw Caleb D working on a list online and earlier today. So I think there's a lot of ways to go with this core still, but I think that Linebreaker is kind of a hinge card in these decks that kind of brings back the Reality Smasher, Thought Not Seer kind of. Cool. All right. One thing I want to ask, we've been talking about Ugin's Labyrinth, and I was going to save stuff that we haven't been seeing for later, but we haven't seen a lot of Affinity yet. And I haven't seen it in the streamer event very much. I haven't seen it in any of the lists that I saw. It wasn't anywhere in the Vegas list, and that felt like a deck that was pretty easy to upgrade with cards from On Horizons 3, so I was a little surprised we didn't see any in the Vegas event. Have you played it? What do you think about it?
I have. I played 2 different lists. One on Friday that had, I know we talked about on the spoiler episode, I was pretty high on Ugin's Binding. So the first list that I played had the maximum number of copies of Ugin's Binding. That card was very bad. I was wrong about that one. And then,
are you sure? After just trying it one time, you're like, I'm sure I'm wrong about it?
I don't know if it's necessarily a main deck card. I think there are matchups where it's very good, but the way that I thought about it, like my initial reaction of just being able to Cyclonic Rift all of your opponents, well, sometimes Cyclonic Rift's not that good against your opponent. They either don't have enough permanents in play, or you're bouncing a Solitude, which happened once, and I was like, well, I have to bounce your thing, and I was just like, don't want to get them back to Solitude. So that version was bad. And then today I worked on a second version that was, no bindings, 4 Kappa Cannoneers, 4 synthesizers, just kind of like really lean, just as stock as you could possibly be. And I did not have a very good experience with it. Now, granted, I played against 2 opponents that had Meltdown, so that didn't help things. And that card is still impossible to beat. But I don't know. It's just, I can't really put my finger on it. I think that the builds that we have are not quite there. But Kappa Cannoneer, I will say, every time I cast that card, it was broken. That card is completely insane. And I'm sure there's going to be a good home for it. Just don't think we've quite found it yet.
Okay. All right. We'll stay tuned for that one, I suppose. All right. What do you want to talk about next, Devin? I have some other cards in order here, but what are you excited to talk about next? Or feel like we must talk about next?
Let's see. You want to talk about Ruby Storm?
I do.
What do you think about that?
Yes.
All right, let's do that.
Okay.
Let's talk about Ruby Storm.
So take us through the deck list.
All right, let's see here. So this is the list that we have here was the one that Spike had played. Now, I'm pretty sure that he had started. Yeah, so I'm pulling up his tweet right now. So he had started a league. I think he had been 3-0, but he had decided that he dropped because he had to go get dinner. The list that I'm looking at, the list that Spike played, and I think he played this on stream in the challenge today too. 4 DRC, 4 Ral Monsoon Mage, 4 Ruby Medallion. Those are kind of your 2 cost reducers.
Right.
And then 4 Reckless Impulse, 4 Ren's Resolve, 4 Unstable Amulet, and 3 Glimpse the Impossible. So effectively 15 cards that allow you to kind of, draw extra cards.
Yeah, this was the biggest thing that surprised me about this moment in Modern is that there were multiple decks that were playing these red Reckless Impulse cards that are fine, or I have been fine for me in Modern. They've been better for me in Pioneer in the past. But in particular, when you think about walking away from blue in Storm, like part of what because I think we kind of thought, yeah, there's going to be a mono red Storm deck because of Raw and Ruby Medallion. But I didn't stop and really think about, well, what's the stuff that's going to get you through your deck? Well, there are plenty of red cards out there, especially when they only cost 1 mana. That's great. And they're all things that let you have the cards for an entire cycle if you want to. So I was kind of like, wow, big up arrow next to Reckless Impulse and Ren's Resolve, I guess, going into this. The ones I definitely did not see coming was Glimpse the Impossible. But let me read this card. So it says, exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. The fact that it says this turn is a little bit concerning, of course.
Yeah.
But at the beginning of the next end step, if those cards remain exiled, put them into your graveyard, then create an 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature, and those tokens have sacrifice to be able to give you mana. So it can ramp you, is the thing that's interesting about this, and you don't lose the cards forever. So playing Glimpse the Impossible, even if it's terrible and you kind of brick on it, it can fuel up future Past in Flames, which I think is like a reasonable thing to have happen with this.
Yeah, or you could even just cast it on... you cast it early, and then maybe you hit a Past in Flames, which you can't really cast early on, but that Past in Flames just goes right to your graveyard, which you can then, convert into cards later on.
And you get a mana for it.
Yeah, that is true. You do get a mana, you get the spawn token. One card that I'm a little surprised to not see here, and it's possible that maybe this is just a different build, which is a card... I actually played a little bit of Ruby Storm on stream today, and the card that I played with, which I was very, very impressed with, was Wheel of Potential. This is the energy wheel. So for those of you who don't remember, it's 2 in a red sorcery. You get 3 energy, then you can pay any amount of energy. When you do, each player may exile their hand and draw that many cards. And then if X is 7 or greater, you can play cards from among the cards that you exiled. That didn't come up too often, but just the ability to, even when I was doing it for 3 or 4, it just felt really, really good. You would just empty your hand, cast this, do it for 4 or 5, draw 5 cards, keep going. Which, yeah, and to be fair, I also played Galvanic Discharge, which was the energy removal spell, and that kind of helps the wheel out a little bit better. So I kind of had this small energy package with Aether Hub, and I think that was, but yeah, I was very, very impressed with Wheel when I played it.
Yeah, definitely curious to see where that goes. The last couple of cards that are in this build include basically the rituals. So it's Desperate Ritual, Pyretic Ritual, Manamorphose. Then there's a 4-pack of Past in Flames and a single Grape Shot. And when I first looked at this deck, I said, how does this kill anybody with a single Grape Shot? That's too risky. And someone in chat pointed out to me the line of text on Unstable Amulet. So we need to double back all the way to one of the other pieces of jewelry in this deck. Because don't forget that Unstable Amulet says whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, Unstable Amulet deals 1 damage to each opponent. And this is how this deck actually wins most of the time now, right?
Yeah, 4 Reckless Impulse, 4 Ren's Resolve, 3 Glimpse. You end up seeing a lot. You can cast a lot of cards from exile, and the Past in Flames, because you're not casting it from your hand, also triggers the amulet. I played a league with my Ruby Storm deck, and I would say probably almost half of the games that I won were just with Amulet.
Just with the Amulet. It just comes up a lot. Were they even for hey, we're going to cast 12 spells in a turn, Storm, where you're I have 30,000 triggers? Or was it more, because I've read some people saying, I think that you can even sort of value Storm in this deck, where you maybe hit someone for 8 one turn, and then the next turn you survive, and then you hit them for 7 again the following turn, and it's just over. So you don't necessarily have to crack it off at one go, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, you can kind of play a little bit more of a small ball. I guess it was easier for me to do that because I also had Wish, which kind of opened up a little bit more possibilities of like I could wish for Empty the Warrens, wish for the One Ring. I think it had some other stuff that I could wish for, but yeah, Unstable. I honestly am very, very surprised at how good that card has been, where it's a card that is good in the small ball games because it's just, if you have energy to throw into it, you're drawing an extra card every turn. And it's also, the damage adds up, even in kind of these like Boros energy decks, just that chip shot damage really adds up every turn.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Was most of my watching today, I didn't get to watch a lot because I had to do some writing for work, and it's much harder for me to watch streams when I'm doing writing as opposed to visual design. And I was really surprised at how good Amulet was just in the Boros deck that Spike was playing, where it was like accounting for 4 or 5 damage a game, giving him cards to draw, giving him outlets for energy that he had that was left over from Galvanic Discharge, and also potentially even making his Raptors better at different points in time. This card is a lot better than I thought it was.
Same. Yeah, I was kind of low on it in the spoiler season, but the more I see it play out, the more this one's probably here to stay.
This card in particular, what do you think about Ruby Storm? Just as it, do you think this deck is going to be a player in the format, or what do you think?
It's really tough to say. I think that this version of Storm, like if you're comparing this to maybe Blue-Red Gift Storm from whenever the heck that deck was playable, who knows how long it's been at this point.
I would say 2017, 18. It was probably reasonably playable then. So we're talking 6 years.
Yeah, that's about right. But the deck did gain a lot, right? Medallion and Ral are much, much better than the cost producers we had in the past, because Medallion doesn't die to creature removal, and Ral is a win condition basically in and of itself. Like if you flip Ral and ultimate it, you do win the game. So your cost reducers are a lot better. Your consistency tools are a lot better. I think there's a lot of options with Wheel of Potential and Unstable Amulet. So the deck did get a lot better, but at the end of the day, if you want to beat Storm, you there's the tools are there. Damping Sphere, Fluster Storm, Rule of Law. There's plenty of ways to make High Noon is a new card that was printed. So there's plenty of ways to beat Storm. So I don't think it's really hard for this deck to become a tier 1 meta contender given how many good sideboard cards there are against it. But I do think that this particular Storm deck is significantly better than basically any other Storm deck we've seen in Modern.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. Do you want to talk about any of these other energy decks really quickly while we're talking about Unstable Amulet? Like, is there more to say about the Boros deck that Spike was playing? Or one thing that I just saw in the Modern League dump that happened today, apparently, which is super fascinating, that they're now just like, here's a Modern League that happened, and we're publishing the results the same day that they went out.
Wait, they already got
There's
posted?
some that are already out here. I don't know from what time to what time. But of course, I found a mono red prowess list in here that is driven by energy that got a 5-0, and it has Amped Raptor.
Bro, Power Balance?
It has Power Balance, which I was kind of like, what? Okay, Power Balance. But I was mostly interested in the fact that this was also running Unstable Amulet along with Slick Shot Show Off, which I thought was pretty interesting, kind of stew of a few different things going on here.
Yeah, so it's like Prowess with the energy package.
Yep.
This looks kind of good.
Yeah.
I like this list.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you have Underworld Breach in here, and so if you have Unstable Amulet in play with Underworld Breach, it's similar to what you were just talking about with Past in Flames, where it's like, if you just cast a bunch of cards from your graveyard, it kind of makes your a turn where you try to go off kind of exponential.
Yeah, and if you have that same setup with Channeler, then you can probably just kill them, like just one shot them. Yeah, we can talk about the Boros energy deck. I don't know what else there is to say about it, because I know that Spike just kind of this is the deck that Spike had just crushed Dingo with. Basically, that deck just cleaned up. Where I think he went like 12-0 in their testing session. That deck looks good.
The thing that I thought was most interesting about it was playing Guide of Souls in a shell that was not Primal Prayer. Like, it wasn't a combo shell. It was playing Guide of Souls. It was playing what's the name of the Flarg? That's not called Flarg. Flage. Flarg is something else, I think.
Where the hell did you get that
Flarg
from?
is a goblin, I think, from like way back in the day. Flage. So we'll go with that. Who knows? Maybe it was a Guar video I saw or something. But the it was a lot of cool cards, and Spike was very up on it. It was kind of like the energy package was, Static Prison and Guide of Souls and Raptor and Galvanic Discharge and also Amulet, and then playing Flage and just a bunch of other Boom Bust and stuff like that. So it was doing like a whole bunch of that kind of wild stuff, and it looked reasonably powerful when I was watching it, and it certainly it had White Orchid Phantom in it as well to do White Orchid Phantom things, and it had the dog that does the blinking and all of these different kind of things. So it was like a ton of MH3 cards, which is all cool, but mostly I just wanted to mention it in the context of it's another place that this kind of energy package that is focused around 3 good red cards seems to be popping up in different places. And there's also even for what it's worth, there's even an energy package that's enabling, not enabling, but it's going into just Omnath. Like there's an Omnath energy package that's just Galvanic, Static Prison, the Wrath. I've seen them trying to play a couple lists with them trying to play the counterspell, which I think even the person who tried that said that it wasn't very good, and stuff like that to kind of like
Aether Spike.
Aether Spike. They're like no, but.
Speaking of 4-color, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just kind of off the cuff real quick, I played against the 4-color deck in the streamer event on Friday, and one thing that I think we may have missed about 6, I don't remember if we discussed this, but you can loop the One Rings with it. Can
you talk through that a little bit? You can retrace the One Ring because you can bring it back because of the retrace ability is what you mean, right?
Correct. So 6 is the 2/4. When you attack, you get a land from your graveyard to the battlefield. And what you do is you get a land back. And then if you have a ring in play and a ring in the graveyard, you can use that land that you just got to retrace the ring from your hand or retrace the ring from the graveyard, new ring. And you can basically just loop that and have protection every single turn. Which is kind of disgusting when you think about it.
I didn't think about what you meant when you said loop it.
Oh, yeah. You loop 2 of them.
I was just thinking you meant reset it when it was doing too much damage to you. You mean
no,
fog.
You just get protection every turn.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That is sick.
Super fog.
That's terrible.
Yeah, I played against the 4-color deck with like Omnath, Ring, Teferi, Renin 6, and actual 6, and I just got destroyed.
That's gonna be annoying.
Absolutely destroyed.
Yeah.
There you go. What else should we talk about?
I would love to talk about Grief and Necrodominance.
Okay. As you would.
As a related kind of thing. Yes, as I would. But the one thing that's really interesting is there was a lot of Grief kind of control lists. There was one in, I believe there's one in the top 6 or top 8 of this Vegas event. That was a mono black list that had Winter Moon. I'll get back into what these were. There was another, but that one had no Necrodominance. There was another one that had 4 Necrodominance in 17th place, and then another one that had 4 Necrodominance in 28th place, and another in 21st that had some rings and some Necros. So the Necrodominance lists weren't at the top of the tables, but there's still a bunch of decks that had it. But Grief is here. They're still scammy. It's a little bit less of a scam package, though, where it was kind of like, well, we just have 4 Not Dead After All and 4 Grief, and that's just kind of like it. And then we have all this other stuff going on. The one that was super interesting was the one that was in the top 8 was Mono Black, and the reason it was Mono Black was because it was running Winter Moon.
Yeah, that's a card that I wasn't necessarily sure would make its way into main decks. I actually played a little bit with a Mono Black scam deck. I didn't quite have Winter Moons, but the list that I played was like, I tried to keep it as streamlined as possible, where I had, 4 Necros, the Grief, the scam package. I had Shieldred, which I've learned that Shieldred with Necro is pretty ridiculous. Like, that's just out of control. I ended up playing the Marches, and I don't remember looking at this list. I want to see if it had Marches or not.
It does not.
Interesting. Okay. Well, this one doesn't have the Necros, I guess.
Yeah, it's no Necros. It's One Ring instead of Necros from what in that kind of like space, but
yeah,
it does have 3 Phyrexian Tower.
Yeah, which is interesting that you would choose to play Tower without Necro, because what I was really impressed by when I played the Mono Black Scam deck was you would just turn 2, play a Tower, Grief, pitch, take your card, sack my Grief to Phyrexian Tower, play a turn 2 Necro. I guess you can sort of do the same thing with Ring, where you can just Grief them on 3 and then sack it and play the Ring, which is still pretty powerful. Like, you're casting Ring ahead of schedule in your Mono Black deck, which you wouldn't expect to happen very often. I'm very intrigued about these main deck Winter Moons, though. I wonder what the decision point was there.
I mean, I think it's just I want to have some extra. I mean, the thing that I took from this was this is a very positive indicator to me that there's enough decks in here that enough decks in the format that are hamstrung by this, that it's potentially worth it to have a strategy that's built around using it, right? Which is what we were kind of unsure about last week. This feels like a check mark in the column of, yeah, maybe there is a deck that's going to use it, and maybe it's not just Merfolk or not Merfolk, or it's, maybe it's not mono red or whatever we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, definitely interesting. And I didn't kind of think about it in the context of scam, but yeah, these scam decks kind of want to be mono black anyways. And I wonder if maybe, now that I'm thinking about it again, I wonder if there's a shell that wants like Winter Moon and Necro in this sort of mono black scam package.
Yeah, so some of these, I believe at least one of these decks had Winter Moon in the sideboards and Necros in the main. The other card that was very funny that I saw, I mean, there are a bunch of cards in these decks. One is several of them were playing Profane Tutor, just main, with no way to abuse it, where it's just like, I guess we just want to get Necrodominance so badly, or a payoff so badly, that we're just going to play Profane Tutor and have it sit there forever. I think one of them even had 4 copies of it.
Jeez.
Which is wild.
I mean, if you kind of think of, if you associate Splinter Twin being Shieldred plus Necrodominance, then having a piece to set that up is pretty good.
Yeah, that could be it. There's another one that was playing Nethergoyf, was a scam. The one that came in 28th place was playing Nethergoyf along with a scam list, which was pretty cool to see. Lots of them had Consuming Corruption, which is the instant that's a creature damage spell. Like, it's a removal spell that deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker, and you gain X life, where X is the number of swamps you control. It's the cheaper version of Corrupt, essentially. There's Force of Despair in some of these lists, main, from Modern Horizons 1.
Wait, they had it main?
This deck that came in by Sean Beardsley had 2 of them main.
Oh boy. 2 main deck Force of Despair. Where it's coming full circle, Dave.
It really is. It really is. The other card that was full circle here that I completely forgot existed. Do you remember a card from Modern Horizons 2 called Break the Ice?
I do remember that one.
Yeah. These decks had several copies.
Labyrinths out of here.
Yeah. Overload. Get them out. I don't know. These were all really cool to me. And of course, like I said last week, I wanted Necro to be interesting. I have to say, Devin, I'm curious what you think about this. I feel very weird about people playing these decks where they have no way to get rid of a Necrodominance in their deck.
It's funny you mentioned that, Dave, because the list that I played, at least the mono black list that I had drafted, I've had 2 copies of Beseech the Mirror specifically for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, that I think is a good one. I was chatting with Jay from our Discord about that as well as being an option. I was even looking at like, well, what other cards even exist that can get rid of it? And there's not many. There's not many.
Not in mono black, yeah.
Yeah, not in mono black. So you're probably stuck with Beseech the Mirror, like you said, if you want to run the right kind of card. I immediately was like, these decks need more Nivenural's Disc, because that's what, I used to play with it. But you do need a reset button, though, right? Like, I feel like you have to be able to give yourself a chance to, like, turn it off before you die.
So, yes and no. I mean, if you're playing with March of Wretched Sorrow X4, it feels like it's maybe less necessary, because you can get into these spots where, like, okay, so you play the Necro, the first time that you activate it, maybe you tap out for it on turn 3. First time you activate it, maybe draw like 3 or 4 cards. If you don't find assuming you're not under immense pressure, if you're under more pressure, then it's a different story. But you do the first value one, next turn you convert those cards, maybe you find a March. But if you find a March, like if you have one early on, then the second time that you go to your end phase, you can just draw, basically pay your life total n -1, draw 14 or whatever, pitch the March, and then just do it again the next turn. Right. So I think if you're playing March, it's not as necessary, but it is still nice to have access to.
Yeah. I'm going to be playing Closet Gix when I do this.
You just want to have an excuse to play Nevernal's Disc.
I do. It was in Modern Horizons 2. I opened a lot of them. I have a lot in my bulk rare box. What do you think of this deck overall? Like, is this the new scam? Basically, is this where scam is going, or do you think this is just a weird testing thing?
So my reaction to the list, and maybe this was just a product of the list that I played, I felt like it was kind of threat light. I don't know, it's hard to describe. But so if you look at kind of the Rakdos scam deck, the red cards, they get to play Ragavan and Fable, in addition to the normal suite of like Orcish Bowmasters, Dothi Voidwalker, and Grief. Also worth noting, a lot of these lists, at least the one that I'm looking at, doesn't even have Dothi Voidwalker, and I want to look at some of the other ones. That one does, and then the top 8 one I think did. Okay, so it was just the one by Sean Beardsley that didn't have it. But suffice to say, I felt like the deck was kind of threat light. Where if you don't have the extra threats in the form of Ragavan and Fable the Mirror Breaker, it's like you can Necro, but it's kind of sort of difficult to close out the game if you need to find Shieldred in that case. So I'm almost wondering if Scam should be built as black-white, and then white gives you access to Solitude and potentially White Orchid Phantom. So, because White Orchid Phantom's also good with Ephemerate and yada yada. So I've been thinking about maybe black-white is the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's a list that Young Dingo was trying as well and posted about on Friday that had Necrodominance, Grief, 2 Shieldred, 4 Solitude, White Orchid. It has Philia, the dog that blinks and stuff like that. So it's an Ephemerate list, and I know that he really liked that list on stream. So maybe that is the way to go. I just wonder if these decks will cease to be scam, potentially. Like these Necro-y ones will cease to be scam and will just be like mono black. They'll basically be coffers without coffers. You know what I mean? More than anything else.
Yeah, that almost looks like what Sean Beardsley, the one that I mentioned that didn't have Dothi Voidwalker in it, because there was one that had the one with Consuming Corruption. Which one was I looking at? I think it was this one. Yeah, because they have like the Urborgs, less creatures, and the Consuming Corruptions. This is the one with Force of Despair. It's almost like you said, just coffers without the coffers aspect.
Yeah. Card advantage instead of mana advantage, almost in a weird way.
And you could probably also play Necro. Like I said, I was a little bit worried about the threats. You could just play Necro in coffers. Like I'm sure that works.
Sounds good to me.
There's got to be something there.
Seems like it. Yeah. All right. Why don't we pick a couple more things? Because you got a big day of streaming tomorrow. We're already over an hour. Why don't we pick a couple more things to talk about that you liked? Was there anything else that you thought was interesting or surprising when you saw it?
I didn't put the deck list here, but I see you mentioned the Phoenix word. Mm-hmm. I know you love to talk about that card.
Always. And Buried Alive too, which is a card that I like.
Yeah, let me see. Let me just pull up the list real quick because the initial list that I played a little bit with it on the early access event on Friday, and I was relatively happy with it. I think that there are some things that maybe need some fixing, but yeah, I think that there's definitely something here in this shell. The list that I played was, I'll just read it off real quick, 4 Phoenix, 4 DRC, that was the creatures. I had 1 Demolich, just kind of as the 5th copy of Arclay Phoenix. But I didn't have any blue sources to cast it, so I was either just casting it for free or maybe off Manamorphose. And then the spells here: 4 Buried Alive, 4 Highway Robbery, 4 Desperate Ritual, 4 Lava Dart, 4 Bowl, 4 Manamorphose, 4 Bauble, and then 2 Underworld Breach, 1 Pyretic Ritual, 2 Gutshot. Now, the card that you might not really understand why it's there is Ritual, which is a card that I think I've seen some other Phoenix lists posted, and I have not seen Ritual in them. But what we talked about was the nut draw, where you just go turn 2, Ritual, Manamorphose, Buried Alive. Yeah. And I did that like 4 or 5 times, and I think my opponent could see it on the spot every time, and it felt really, really good, to the point where I know, like, I'm almost positive that Ritual is correct to play in this deck. I just don't know what, like, is it 5? Is it 6? I don't think it's 8, but somewhere in that range. But the problem with this deck is when you don't have Buried Alive, kind of sucks.
Yeah. That's too bad to hear. Like, it's just not fast enough, and it's not kind of like that. That's what you're really doing here, is just how turbo can we get with Phoenixes?
Right, and the issue is, if you don't have Buried Alive, you don't have any other good way to bin Phoenixes, right? There's no Faithless Looting, there's none of that stuff, so it's like, what is your deck really doing? I guess you can be like a DRC Underworld Breach deck, but I almost wonder if we need to play some alternative threat where I have the slick shots in the board, and maybe we should just main deck those, and then your plan B is like, if you don't find Phoenix, then you just slick shot kill them. So
yep, absolutely. Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. I think Buried. I still have this weird feeling that like I mean, Buried Alive is a powerful card. I don't know if this is the shell that's going to get broken with it in it. I think we'll just keep an eye on it and see where it goes from here. Can I tell you a couple of things other things that I was surprised to not see?
Sure.
In the event in Vegas, and most of the lists that I've seen online too, since people have been playing with the Modern Horizons 3 cards, Amulet Titan, 0 copies of Flare of Cultivation.
Really?
I haven't seen a single Flare of Cultivation in any Titan list that I've seen over the whole weekend.
Surprising.
Yes, very surprising to me. But the main place that I've seen it is Cultivation is in Yawgmoth, actually, along with Phyrexian Tower. Which I think
that kind of makes sense.
It's like how bursty can we get with our mana, and maybe it's helping that deck out a little bit more than it's helping Titan. But pretty interesting.
Well, I guess the thing there is the Titan doesn't really have a second creature they want to sacrifice to it, whereas in Yawgmoth you can play you can play Grazer and Young Wolf, but in Titan it's like if you don't draw Grazer, it's you can't. You gotta pay 3 mana for this thing. It's kind of, you don't want to do that,
Yeah. There might just also not be space for it. It's like, what am I taking out to put this card in? And maybe I ramp enough already. But I felt, being a casual observer of Amulet Titan, that it would be worth the burst, but apparently it is not worth the mana advantage. The other thing,
the Titan players just refuse to change.
I mean, that might be true too. That could be true too. I haven't seen a lot of Shifting Woodlands just yet. I did see Mason Clark play it on stream a little bit, but it didn't seem like it factored into too much in the games that I saw anyway. Also haven't seen Flare Denial in Merfolk yet, although I've only seen one Merfolk list, and that was in the Vegas event, and it went 3-3, so it wasn't even that, didn't even have that great of a day.
Yeah, I played against Merfolk once today, and then I played against Shifting Woodlands also once today. The Shifting Woodlands deck looked pretty good. I mean, they were relatively reasonably able to achieve Delirium and then just kind of, but I think there are ways to bin the Omniscience where they had Philology Archaeologist and Tainted Indulgence to discard or mill them over, and then they would just kill me with Emrakul. And I think that's pretty close to what Spike was playing too.
Yep. I will say, I saw several different people, Pyganti, Young Dingo, playing Invert Polarity in blue-red decks, and just basically having it just be a card that's in their deck and saying that they liked that it was a card in their deck, which I am medium surprised by, I guess. I mean, I guess we'll see if that sticks around, but you got to take the upside, like you said, even if it's kind of a dumb mechanic to have on a card, the flipping. I have heard people complaining about the flipping on Rawl, which even you mentioned that you had an extremely bad beat with the flipping on Rawl on the way in to this podcast recording.
I don't even think extremely bad describes it.
Yeah.
I was at 8 life against a Prowess opponent, and they had a Lava Dart in the graveyard, and I'm like, okay, well, as long as I don't lose 8 coin flips, or no, I was at 9, and I was like, as long as I don't lose 8 coin flips in a row, we'll be fine. We're not going to die to this Lava Dart. And 8 coin flips later, I took lethal damage.
Unbelievable.
So,
yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, sorry to hear that.
Clearly, Ral's unplayable because of that.
Yeah.
So.
I've seen a bunch of people playing Tamiyo in a creature package with Ragavan, which is not exactly what I was expecting to see at the bottom of like a blue-red curve was for Ragavan for Tamiyo. What do you think? Have you seen Tamiyo? What do you think about that so far?
I have seen, I think it was Dingo played a little bit with it, and I think Spike was playing it too. What's cool about Tamiyo is it's sort of like a 1-mana threat because you can't actually flip it on turn 2 with the bauble.
Right.
So it kind of gives you this additional cheap threat that you can play early and try to get it flipped. And I mean the flip card is pretty good. It protects itself a little bit. You can rebuy a counter spell with it. So I mean, from what I've seen, it's looked pretty good so far.
Interesting. But that is kind of everything that I had to talk about this weekend. Devin, before we get out of here, any last thoughts, or do you want to share with people what you're the most excited about?
I mean, definitely Nadu. I'm going to be spending a lot of time on that deck. I think that there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of open or untapped potential in the Nadu stuff. Speaking of which, I'm looking at the 5-0 list, and I'm seeing this sort of, I guess, mono green It's literally just blue for Nadu, but the deck's like Grazer, Halfling, Bristly Bill, Nantuko, 4 Summoners Pact, 4 Shuko, 4 the One Ring, and 26 lands with Grazer. And that deck picked up a 5/0. So yeah, plenty of stuff to do. And I will be casting Nadu quite a bit over the next couple of weeks. Turns out, it turns out, Dave, I thought that Nadu was commander bait the whole time, and as it turns out, they just gave me the best card in the set as the spoiler card.
You know what I think is really funny is that you had that card as your spoiler, and Stan had Raptor as his spoiler, which we didn't go super deep on, but like, I know, Everett's still really enthusiastic about this card after playing it. That's appearing in lots of places as a keystone of this like energy package. I mean, Galvanic Discharge is probably the real keystone of the red version of that, or maybe the amulet. But still, it's kind of like 3 parts to that whole thing. So it was interesting that both of you guys got really good preview cards.
Yeah, what are they going to give to the dive down the next Modern Horizons?
Well, nothing. They gave us nothing. It's you guys that got the stuff. So we get some spoiler halo by proxy, I suppose.
Right. Yeah.
But as for me, being the contrarian that I can be about deck choice, I will probably start with Ruby Storm as something just to play around with on Moto, which sounds kind of painful on Moto, but maybe it's okay. Maybe it's not too bad to play.
Honestly, it was pretty fun when I played it.
Was it? That's awesome.
I had a good time.
I mean, I'm going to be looking at that, and honestly, I will be looking at mono black Grief on the control end to try Necrodominance out, and then probably the third deck that I'll be looking at is Eldrazi Aggro, just to play some line breaker because I have my eyes on that card coming out of the spoiler as well. So that's what's on my mind for the next few days.
Line breaker too good.
I guess we'll see what happens, but stuff is happening.
Stuff is definitely happening, and birds are among us. That's all I'll say.
I guess one last question I'll just ask your impression for. So Everett, when I was listening to his stream, someone was asking him about like, well, what about old Yawgmoth? What about old Titan? What about old Murktide? And he was kind of like, as far as I'm concerned, those decks don't exist anymore, or like not exactly the same way that you imagined that they exist. Do you think that's just what we're going to have for a while, and then some of those decks will reemerge in a pre-MH3 form, or do you think there's enough cards from MH3 that are just going to pepper everything, even if they're commons? Like, what's your impression so far?
I think every deck is going to get at least one upgrade. Like, even in the event of Amulet Titan, where there's maybe there's one tops, maybe 2 cards. I'm looking at an Amulet Titan deck list that 5-0'd, and there's 1 copy of Springheart and Nantuko. So, I mean, everybody's we're going to try stuff, and I'm sure decks will. Yeah, the decks that you saw previously before MH3, those, just get those out of your brain. Those basically don't exist anymore. Maybe the metagame might be similar, but those decks will be very different.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm excited to see where it goes. And good luck to you, Devin, on another 12-hour stream tomorrow, and I'm assuming for many days for the rest of this week.
I'm going to need it. I'm going to need it. At least tomorrow and Thursday. We're recording this on... Is today Tuesday? It is Tuesday. I don't even know what day it is. We're recording this on Tuesday. Wednesday and Thursday, 12-hour streams. I'm going to try to take it easy on Friday. And then Saturday, I'm actually playing... I didn't even know I could announce this because I didn't know they announced it officially, but I'm playing in the Creator Showdown, which is Pauper.
Oh.
So if anybody's got some Pauper deck list, let me know, because I don't know what the heck to play.
Pauper with MH3 too, and there's some bangers in the common slot for sure. So, okay.
Yeah. Well, they already banned one of them.
True.
So.
That's the one that has a ban already. Is the Pauper format from MH3. Listen, if you listen to our show and you haven't been to support Devin's stream, Devin is out there working for you right now. Go check out twitch.tv/Doomwake with 2 zeros instead of the O's. Throw him some subs. The guy is working very hard to figure out what's happening in MH3 and share that with all of you. So go do that for us and for yourself.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. If you'd like to submit a question, you can reach out on Twitter at The Dive Down or email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. And you can also check out our store at thedivedown.com/store. Head over to havetoplay.com to get some incredible deck and dice boxes, playmats featuring the Equipmag system, Use code the Dive Down 2024 for 10% off your first order. Also, shout out to Mana Traders for sponsoring us for so long. Sign up for Mana Traders and use the code the Dive Down _43A, all one word, for 10% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards. And as always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and draw a card, place a land into play, but only up to twice per turn.